privilege, really, to be the one to moderate this conversation between three he's who are working globally for she's. And each of them represents a very powerful platform that they have chosen to use to advocate for gender equality. I'm going to begin with the Prime Minister, His Excellency from Iceland. There are so many ways in which government can impact gender equality, Prime Minister, and you sit in the top position in the top country in the world in terms of gender equality. Yes. So many times when things are said they can't be done, Iceland is always the example of, well, yes, it can. And we're going to talk about one of those very specifically with the Prime Minister. But can you talk to us about how you think about your job, its huge sphere of influence, and the ability you have to use that to promote women and gender equality?
Yes, of course, I have my mic here. I was going to get yours. So, thank you. Let me first start by saying I am very much inspired by the He4She Arts Week, and it's an honor to be here participating. And let me also say, yes, we may rank #1 in the world at the moment, but the job is not done still. Just a few months ago, we had elections in Iceland, and gender equality is still on the political agenda. It is one of the most important agendas still. So we don't feel like we've reached an end goal in any means, but we are proud of what we have already achieved. So there are so many ways in which we can continue to move forward. Gender budgeting is one issue which I worked with when I was finance minister last election period. So we are kind of intervening the thought of gender equality into all acts. New rules on legislative preparation to make sure that gender equality is one of the aspects we look into when proposals for new acts are considered for Parliament. We've also introduced quotas. Legislation can help. It can work as a helpful tool. And at the moment, what we are especially looking at is exactly a point which was made here earlier, which is equal pay. And we are considering law to push for that, so that larger companies in Iceland are obliged to show that they fulfill the standard which can ensure equal pay.
Mr. Prime Minister, can I just follow that point a bit? Because he's a global champion for He4She, and as a global champion, you make a commitment, a very large commitment, and in this case it was to bring Iceland to equal pay for equal work, I think by the year 2020. Now, that is generally one of the areas that you hear business say, we can't possibly do it on that timeline. It's way too many barriers. So what are the processes that you will, from your position, put in place that makes that possible?
So what we are considering at the moment is to come up with the equal pay standard, so that all companies that have more than 25 employees will have to go through the process of checking whether equal pay is exercised within the company. So there is a standard which we have already taken up, but not all are following it. So they will get a certification. So it is actually legalizing the need for certifying every third year that you've gone through the process to make sure that same pay is paid for same work.
So it's not just once, you have to be recertified every 3 years.
Yeah.
So Oscar Eustace, as the executive director of the Public Theater, is one of the great figures of the arts and culture in this city, and has had a profound difference way beyond the boundaries of New York City. And Oscar, as someone who looks at the arts landscape, and we've already heard what an important influence it is in terms of the stories we see represent for us what we can be and what we aspire to be. How does that come into your thinking as you select plays, as you look for artists?
Thank you. It's a huge issue, and I want to point out something that was a very important moment for me about 5 years ago, because we're an artistic organization, and as an artistic organization, I resist the idea of quotas, because each individual work of art is so specific and so individual that I resisted the idea that somehow we were supposed to have actual numerical standards. However, metrics are useful. And 5 years ago, we did an in-depth analysis of the gender of the playwrights and the directors, the leaders of the teams that we were employing. And I was shocked at how bad our numbers were. I realized that, like a lot of other people, I was complacent about running a progressive organization that was giving voice to all, and I was fooling myself about how really equal we were. And we've made a concerted effort since then to do, I think, the two things that as storytellers we're most required to do. First is make sure that we have women on stage representing not only themselves, but standing in for all of humanity. Women are not a special interest. Women are all of us. And so, for instance, right now, we've just transferred to Broadway Lynn Nottage's brilliant play, Sweat, which is about the deindustrialization of a steel town, Reading, Pennsylvania. A subject which you would immediately think, that sounds very masculine. But there are two female steelworkers who are at the center of this play, one African American, one Caucasian. And the play changes entirely because of that. So we've had to we've been inspired to make a much more conscious effort to make sure that not only are women represented on stage, but behind the scenes, that women are the writers, the voices, the directors of our work. And I have to say, like the Prime Minister, our job is not done. I'm not satisfied yet, but it's in my head now in a way it never would have been if we hadn't done that metrical analysis.
Well, data does matter.
Yeah.
And numbers matter. And Madame Fumsili reminded us that numbers, when it comes to representation in film and in all media, are really still far from equal.
That's right.
And while I understand the reluctance to put quotas on something like the Public Theater or any arts organization, how much does it play in your mind, though, Oscar, as you are looking at a year's schedule and you're deciding on the plays, choosing a Lynn Nottage over others, for example?
It's in my mind constantly, and I did a little, I don't know, a challenge to myself, which said, okay, if I'm not going to do quotas, what I'm going to do is 2 or 3 months before we announce our season, I'm going to invite in two of the strongest feminists I know, Lisa Crone and Madeline George, two great playwrights, and I'm going to sit down with them and I'm going to explain my season to them and why my season is composed the way it is, and I'm going to listen to whatever they have to say. The beautiful thing about that is that means Lisa Crone is in my head all year long. Every moment I'm going to have to explain this to Lisa, who, you know, I think is one of the smartest people I know, as well as a great artist. And that's been tremendously helpful in just readjusting my point of view. And the other thing I just want to say that's very important is, of course, who sits in my chair matters. And we have only very briefly ever had a woman at the head of the Public Theater. And it's part of my job to make sure that I am training candidates to succeed me who represent the full diversity of this country. So that means women and people of color, and I need to make sure that when I step down, I will have left a field of trained, qualified people to compete for my job who are as diverse as the city itself.
Is that a promise?
It's a promise.
Thank you, Oscar, for the good work and for keeping that in mind. Lisa is definitely a good person to have in your head and in your ear. So last year, Edgar Ramirez spoke at the He for She event, and was an extraordinary moment when you stepped forward as an advocate for He for She and talked about your own journey as a man to this position. And you, like others in this room, have access and power within the sphere of media that can make a very big difference. How do you take that narrative that you spoke about last year and apply it to your choices?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much. I feel very honored to be here this morning, to be included in this group. Well, basically, the reason why I so gladly accepted the invitation on behalf of Punzili and the whole team at UN Women and he for she was the opportunity to, because that's pretty much what we artists do. We question norms and we question structures and rules and basically my experience as an actor has allowed me to explore human nature and the extent of human nature, and that's where I found a connection to the messages that he for she promotes around the world, because we're not one thing or another, we're many things at the same time. I mean, we are darkness and we're light, we are good and we're bad, we're strong and we're weak, all the time, at the same time sometimes, and in different moments of our lives. So there has been a misconception about what gender equality is. I mean, many people tend to think that it's about women, but actually gender equality is a liberation movement for all genders. And my contribution, hand to hand with Punzeli and her team, it's to let the other half, like other men, other guys, to reconsider and to explore and question our own masculinity.
Well, that was the question that always comes up. How does a man confront the stereotypes of masculinity that are seen throughout media, prevalent as the way in which we look at a man, define a man? So how did you find your own way to a new definition of masculinity in this universe in which there's one such dominant one?
Well, I think that arts and my craft as an actor has allowed me to reconsider societal positions on masculinity. I mean, normally feeling and being conscious of your feelings is considered to be weak, and historically weakness has been associated to the feminine. So basically, when you reject sensitivity, in a way, you're rejecting the feminine, and that's where the stereotypes start. And basically, what makes us human, and that was the question. That was the main question. That was the center of my contribution last year when I spoke at the UN at the second anniversary of He for She. What does it mean to be human? I mean, what makes us human, and what unifies us all is the ability to feel and to feel deeply. But if we live in a society at large that condemns feelings, then we don't have the opportunity to express ourselves. And arts lend themselves to be a window and a platform to express ourselves and to define who we are. So basically, my invitation is to be proud of our feelings, to feel deeply, because that's exactly what is going to allow. For example, if we men, if we feel frustrated because we are, according to the patriarchal mandate, we need to be successful, we need to have money, we need to win, we need to be number one in everything we do. We need to have a lot of women, we need to be ready to sex, we need to do all these things all the time, because that's what is expected at large from us. If we, of course, and that's setting us up for failure, because nobody can be number one in every single thing. And that frustration, if that frustration is channeled inward, if it doesn't have evolved a way to express itself in a positive manner, and if it goes inward, then it goes in the way of depression and suicide. I mean, we know, the data, as we were speaking earlier, is very precise, and actually it's very alarming. Or how the issue of male suicide and male mental health, it's a taboo. Nobody speaks about it, and if it goes outward, then it becomes violent. So, if we consider by this mandate, this patriarchal mandate, that women are an appendix and they are in a way our property, so where does this violence going to end up at the first place? I mean, when the rules are blurred, when there's chaos, the first rights that are violated are women's and girls' rights. So basically, what we're trying to do through he for she and what I'm trying to do as a contribution is to speak openly about feelings, and that we men, boys can cry and boys should cry, and that's pretty much what we've been focused on. In try to invite men to allow themselves to feel, and not feel that pressure, because in the end, all this patriarchal mandate is affecting us all.
And the flip side of changing that narrative around what it means to be a man is that there has been an increase in the amount of violence against women and girls in every country, at the same time that there have been movements toward gender equity. Part of the way we change that are the stories we tell, and part of the way we change that is the way we live our own lives. And Mr. Prime Minister, I've read about you that you do some rather unusual things for, and it's sad that it's unusual, but it's unusual because we don't usually think of a prime minister doing some of the work, or not just a prime minister, a man. In any position. So talk to us about that, how you take this way that you feel about gender equity and women into your personal life, your family life, the way that you're modeling it for your children, as well as your country.
Are we going to get to the secret here?
We could.
I see. So what you see here are pink hands. It's not because I have removed my nail polish, pink. It's because of something I like doing, and I did last night, which was baking a cake. And this was from the color dyeing for the sugar mass. So I was gonna ask Elizabeth to come up here and take delivery of the cake I did yesterday. I can hardly say it's a contribution for Arts Week, but still it's a creative something.
Well, I particularly love the color of the icing, and it does show up on your hands.
Yeah, it took some time to.
I thought maybe you were wearing nail polish, but
that's not the thing I do, but I like baking cakes. Or maybe I shouldn't say. Maybe the best description is I like decorating cakes, okay?
Oh. Well, we're going to share this cake, not right this moment, but in just a few minutes, and then we can all talk about how good is he at baking the cake. But and this is seriously an important step forward. Yes, would you like to take it from Silly?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So you're going to take it, but you promise not to disappear with it. We said we would share it.
Yes, this cake has to be shared. It's too good to eat. I know people are looking for selfies. Oh, pictures, not selfies, huh? Thank you so much, Prime Minister.
Well, it's my pleasure. I really did enjoy it.
I think for the picture, we ought to have you stand with the cake that you baked, Mr. Prime Minister.
So.
This is unpaid care work.
Yes.
So I'm going to come back to ask you a bit more about the other activities that are a part of your personal life, and the way in which you carry this image of yourself and what it means to be a man as a father and as a husband into your personal life.
Well, let me just say that I can very much relate to what Edgar was just saying here on just being yourself and not being afraid of your feelings and taking part in your children's activities and lives. You know, one of the things I do like about what is happening in Iceland is has to do with young girls. And you know, when I was growing up, I did play soccer and all other sorts of sports, but it was very unusual for women to play soccer, and this has changed a lot. So there are, in my small municipality, big groups of girls that do play sport, and and they have to experience that we do support it and we show up. And in just a matter of, let's say, 1 or 2 decades, we've seen complete transformation where all fathers, they do take part. We do travel with them to take part in competitions and so on. So I think it's just, at the end of the day, it's just about what was said earlier. It's about not being afraid of your feelings and expressing them, and being a politician. Sometimes it is expected that you are the hard type.
You have to win. Well,
yes. Yeah. Well, I like
so
winning.
will
I like
the
winning.
headline in
I have
Iceland
to admit. Yeah. But it's about also showing that you're a human being, and at the end of the day, that's the best way to relate to the people you're trying to get a message across to.
And the press in Iceland, it'll be okay to have this picture of you and Filmsili and the cake?
Yeah,
and
for sure, for sure.
It won't be, good. But Oscar, stories are the way that we define ourselves and the way we define others, yes? And it's a reason that what we see on stage and film has such powerful impact on us. Those are the narratives we believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how much have you seen that change in terms of the kinds of stories that come now to the public to go on stage? Are they helping us move toward gender equity?
We're trying, and we're having some real successes. I'm very proud of the fact that last year we moved our production of Eclipsed to Broadway, which was the first time that a show that was entirely cast and led by African women has appeared on Broadway. And we open Eclipse tomorrow night in San Francisco, which I'm very happy about too. But not enough, not enough. When we did this wonderful music Fun Home that Lisa Krohn wrote the book, Janine Tesori wrote the music, and Alison Bechdel wrote the underlying book for it. And I learned about the Bechdel Test, which I'm sure all of you know, which I didn't know at the time, which is don't see a movie if it doesn't have more than one woman in it, if the two women don't have a scene where they talk together, and if what they talk about isn't only men. And you start applying that, and it is staggering how many movies you can't watch. It is just, it really is, it's a beautiful, simple test. But I want to say one thing about Fun Home, because this is a little geeky, so forgive me those of you who have no interest in the theater. But in the musical theater, the traditional structure is near the beginning, there's something called an I want song, where the protagonist announces what he or she wants, and then the rest of the musical is pursuing that objective to the end. What Lisa Krohn did in making Fun Home into a musical is she replaced the traditional I want song with the song that the entire family sings about the father, which is actually entitled He Wants, them adjusting to what he wants. And she's doing it, this brilliantly subversive thing by doing that, which is on the one hand, she's pointing out that all of these women and children are forced to live in reaction to what the male protagonist desires, what he's pursuing, and making that trying to live in reaction the actual story of the show. So these women become the protagonists, become the subjects of the story, not the objects of the story. And as a result, among other things, you end up with a collective protagonist. You end up with a protagonist that isn't one person, but is the family as a whole. And that's the way that I look at that and I go, that is genius dramaturgy. That is feminist dramaturgy that has something to teach all of us precisely about saying life is not about one person pursuing their goal. Life is about how groups work together and succeed or fail together.
Would you remind us what that test is again? That's such a good takeaway.
The Bechdel Test, which Alison Bechdel created, and it is to ask of every movie or play, does it have more than one woman in it? Do two women have a scene together? And do they talk about anything other than men in that scene?
It's amazing how many movies that will eliminate.
It's just, and it is eye-opening when you go in and you watch movies or theater, any other story, with that lens in front of you. Again, it reveals the biases that we're not aware of. And that's when you say we're always trying to push boundaries, that's one of the things that we have to do as artists, is reflect back to us ourselves and make us go, oh my God, I didn't realize that was who I am. I didn't realize those were my assumptions. And then things can start to change.
So as an artist, do you have a test or, you know, a set of requirements when you're looking at a script? I won't do this and I will do that?
Well, I try not to be political about my choices as an artist, but definitely there's certain contexts where I don't feel comfortable, and for me it's very difficult to at this stage of my life to play a character that would be women's abuser, for example. It would be very hard for me to play it. So I know that in love stories, and especially the good ones, there are things that happen within, this is within love and the relationship. But to get to physical abuse, to psychological abuse, it is something that I feel uncomfortable. I try not to. I think that in the end, the choices that you make as an actor is like a secret dance between us and our characters, and I haven't really figured out whether they chase us or we chase them. And I think that in the end, there's probably an subconscious discourse that we're building from one character to another. I mean, I try to make it always as emotional as possible. That's why I try to set my own politics as a person aside. But definitely, I will gravitate towards what makes me feel comfortable and challenged at the same time. However, in life, I remember I talked to Elizabeth about this before I had I had the opportunity to speak at the second anniversary of He for She. What I try to do is, there's an exercise that really works when we want to measure the gender inequality in situations. It's just change the gender of any situation, and then you'll see if a situation of inequality is going on. I remember 2 years ago, I was spending vacations with my family on the beach. I was in Mexico, and it's my mom, my dad, my sister, and she has 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl. So the oldest boy is 50 years old, the youngest boy is 4 years old, and the girl is 7 years old. So we're there by the beach. We're sitting in our seats, and we're reading and talking. And then suddenly the little girl, Maria Camila, she doesn't like sand. I mean, she doesn't like it. And then from time to time, she would go to the water, just clean the sand, and then come back. So there was a moment that she did that. She came back, and the little boy, the 4-year-old, had moved from his seat to her seat and sat there. Then when she came back, she said, "Well, that's my seat." And then he didn't want to stand up. And then again she protested, "That's my seat." No, he didn't stand up. And then suddenly my sister, and I think that my dad said, "Don't worry, you're older than him, just sit over there." And she protested, but she okay, she sat over there. Later on, I looked up, but I kept reading. And then later on, she goes back to the beach, she cleans her hands, comes back, and now the 15-year-old is on her seat, sitting on her seat. And then she starts to protest a little bit stronger, like, "Hey, that's my seat, that's my seat." And nobody was paying attention. And then, "That's my seat, that's my seat." And then suddenly, nobody paid attention. Of course, he's older. He said, "Let's just shut up and go to the other seat." And then she goes to the corner, like next to a palm tree. She's not crying, but she's sobbing. She's really upset. And then suddenly, I look at that. I look at her. I look at them. I look at her. She's sobbing. And I said, "Okay, you stand up, you get up from your seat, you give your seat back to your sister, and family, we need to talk." Because clearly that's where the message, because we're all in this culture, I mean, actually, I think that the main goal of these gatherings and these campaigns and these conversations is for us to be conscious of the stronghold we're under. I mean, basically, we're all victims, and we're all raised in a patriarchal society, and I think that all the way from feminism to gender equality liberation movement, it's all about becoming conscious of this mandate and how can we change the stereotypes and the constraints that are imposed on us. And then I talked to my family and I said, this is where it starts. I mean, this is where the seed is planted for that little girl to feel she's different and she's inferior to her male sibling. So basically, the message that we're sending to a 7-year-old is that you're weaker, you're inferior, and you have to serve to the male privilege. And that was very revelatory to me. And then a few months later, Elizabeth and Puncelli invited me to be part of He for She, and I shared this anecdote
You're
to them.
starting it early on. So one final question, Mr. Prime Minister. The concept that is applied in art often, as Edgar said, is just change the pronoun and make the character she instead of he and see if it works. I think of Iceland as a country that's changed the pronoun. You know, you were the first country to say she about the president of a country, the first country to elect a female president, and you've done that over and over again, sort of broken that barrier of where he and she, you know, could be interchanged. So how do you think of yourself and the legacy that will come from your office? How will you be? How do you want people to think about your time and the top leadership position?
No pressure.
Yeah, well, you know, one way to think about it is to say, when the day comes that you can say that you don't notice that it is an issue, a woman is the PM, or chairing parliament, or again elected the president, that's the day when we've achieved something. And you mentioned the first elected president, which we had in Vigdís Finnbogadóttir. And I think it is important because role models, they really do matter. And we have had some very strong role models, and she was definitely one of them, an icebreaker. We've also had women's political parties even. And we're almost to equal representation in Parliament. I think it's around 48, 52, or just about. Looking back, I hope I can say I was a role model for change, for continuing the fight for equality, and taking part in the He for She campaign makes me proud, and I am honored to be here serving as a champion.
And thank you for your good work. I hope you'll join me in thanking 3 men who represent, you know, 3 different ways in which change is coming about because of a campaign like He for She, an artist who makes his individual choices differently now, an artistic director who has the collective impact of audiences, and of course a prime minister who can put policy into place. So would you join me in thanking these he's who are fighting for women all over the world. And now we're going to enjoy the Prime Minister's cake. I don't know who's going to cut it or distribute it, but that's been offered. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you.
Very good to
Nicely
see you.
said.
Thank you so much.